Heritage is more than monuments, archives, or landscapes. It is also the living traditions, practices, and stories passed from generation to generation. As climate change accelerates, so too does the risk of losing irreplaceable heritage, particularly in vulnerable communities. This calls for urgent action, innovative solutions, and inclusive approaches to ensure that our shared legacy is protected for future generations. Over the next 4 days, this webinar will take us on a journey. We will begin by understanding the threats of our heritage faces in changing climate. We will then turn to the role of disaster risk management and explore the policies and practices needed to safeguard heritage during times of crisis. We will listen to the voices of our heritage community, our custodians of knowledge and resilience, who remind us that climate justice must also be cultural justice. And finally, we will look forward exploring how technology, innovation, and sustainable practices can help us adapt and build resilience for the future. I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to our partners, speakers, and participants who have joined us in this important dialogue. Your insights, your expertise, and your commitment are vital to advancing the protection of our heritage in the face of climate emergency. As we reflect, engage, and share over the coming days, let us be guided by a simple truth. Heritage is not a luxury, but necessity. It grounds us, unites us, and lights the way forward. Even in times of uncertainty, together we can ensure that South Africa's heritage not only survives, but thrives as a source of resilience and inspiration for generations to come. I thank you, and I look forward to the rich discussions that lie ahead. And at this point, I would like to introduce my newly appointed chairperson of SARA, Ms. Elodie Tlwaele.
Is my camera on? Good morning. Am I visible?
Yes, you are visible, Chair. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, partners, friends of heritage. It is an honor to join you today.
Apologies for that, Chair. Apologies for that. We can see you, yes.
Okay, please nice start again. Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, partners, and friends of heritage. It is an honor to join you today as we open the South African Heritage Resources Agency's annual Heritage Month webinar, held from the 16th to the 19th of September 2025. Each year, this platform allows us to reflect, to engage, and to act in the spirit of Heritage Month. A time when our nation comes together to celebrate the richness of our past, the strength of our diversity, and the promise of our future. This year's commemoration carries special significance as we situate our discussions within the global context of the G20 theme, which is climate change and disaster risk management. Heritage Month reminds us that heritage is not just about memory, it's about continuity. It is about ensuring that the cultural, historical, and spiritual treasures that have been entrusted to us are safeguarded against the challenges of our time, chief among them being the existential threat of climate change. South Africa is both blessed and challenged in this regard. We are blessed with heritage of extraordinary richness, from iconic archaeological sites and battlefields to sacred landscapes, built environments, and vibrant living traditions. Yet we're challenged by the growing risks of floods, droughts, fires, and rising seas, forces that threaten not only our environment, but also the places, practices, and identities that define who we are. As chairperson of SARA, I believe that this heritage month calls on us to renew our commitment to stewardship. We must embrace both local knowledge and global frameworks. We must align our efforts with the priorities of the G20, while ensuring that South Africa's voice is strong, rooted in our realities, and reflective of our communities. In doing so, we affirm and protect the protection of our heritage in inseparable form. We affirm that the protection of heritage is inseparable from the pursuit of sustainability, resilience, and justice. Over the next 4 days, we will explore together how heritage can be protected in the face of climate change, how communities can lead in building resilience, and how innovation can light the way forward. These conversations are not theoretical. They're essential. But without action, we risk losing the very legacy that binds us together as South Africans and as part of the global community. So on behalf of the South African Heritage Resources Agency, SARA, I thank you all for joining us during this Heritage Month. Let us use this moment not only to celebrate our heritage, but also to safeguard it so that generations yet to come may inherit a legacy of strength, of resilience, and pride. I wish you fruitful deliberations and a very, very successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for the very powerful message. Your camera cut during your talk. If you could please just show the people your face so they can see who SARA's newly elected chairperson is. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. No problem at all. The message was well received. Thank you so much. Now, with that said, we're going to skip right into our program. Our program director for today is Mr. Keenan Africa. Ms. Mama Komoreng Khasi will then do the introduction at the end. So I would, she's actually just walked in right now. Good morning, Komi. We're just waiting for you. If you could just give us 1 second as Komi settles in to give us the purpose of the webinar. And now, let me welcome Ms. Mama Komoreng Khasi Lisaona, who's going to be giving us the purpose of the webinar.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to my CEO. Good morning to our guests. Ben, I don't know who we have in the audience, but we do appreciate the attendance today. It is one of the series that we have every year that now our Heritage Week webinar has become a norm within SARA. And I think, Ben, this is our 4th year, but every year feels like the first year every time. And so as we embark on this week, what we are doing as heritage with the rest of the heritage sector is to try and remember, when I will give an example of the developers with the communities, where there may be a disagreement. The last resort that the communities always go to is heritage. And one wonders that, when everything almost fails, you remember your roots, you remember who you are. And so Heritage Week and Heritage Month within South Africa, I think it is that time when we take a pause and try to remember our cultures, and within South Africa, very diverse cultures. And this week, the SARA team has worked very hard to try and get us in these reflections in various days with various themes within which our guests will engage in conversations with the participants for us to understand the broad spectrum of heritage management within the context of how heritage is impacted today in times of disasters, in times of climate change. And so as we look for the tools, as we explore where we are at, we really call upon your engagements all, that we may come at the end of the fourth day, that we will come up with the solutions and the tools that can benefit heritage resources management, better promotion and better conservation and protection of the heritage resources. And so my task, as I've been asked here, is really to say, engage thoroughly as much as possible to a degree that we will be able to come up with the solutions. We thank you for your time over the 4 coming days. And we are looking forward to really open, engaging discussions. Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Komi, for that very warm message. And now we are going to get into our main program for today. As I said earlier, our program director today is Mr. Keenan Africa. I'm going to be handing over to him now. And I thank you all so much for your participation today. Please engage using the chat, and you are welcome to pose any questions or queries to all of our wonderful speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So the welcoming has already been done. So let me just do a greeting once again. Good morning, everyone that is in attendance. We thank you for your attendance. And since we are in Cape Town, a warm away. Just to put that in. So thank you. Just to add on to Ben, what Ben has said for rules of engagement, please engage with us today. Add your comments and questions. And also noting that there are arts and cultural institutions and organizations attending. Please add whatever you are hosting this Heritage Month. For those that have not received an invitation to a braai, they may have something to attend to. So please extend your invitations out so that we have things to do this Heritage Month. South Africa is a lovely, lovely place, and we do appreciate seeing more of it. And just for that, we will be coming into our first presentation, which is Mr. Ben Mosinga, who will be providing an overview of the climate threats to South Africa's heritage landscape. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Keenan. I'm going to get straight into my presentation for today, which is going to provide an overview of the climate threats, not just facing South Africa, but Africa's heritage as well. And essentially, as I mentioned earlier, South Africa is hosting the G20 this year, and we are aligned with the G20 theme, which is looking at cultural resilience in the face of climate change. Now, when we talk about the spectrum of risks to climate, to cultural heritage in the face of the climate crisis in Africa, this obviously poses a threat to both the tangible and intangible heritage. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's worth mentioning that when we talk about tangible heritage, We are talking about the physical artifacts, sites, and landscapes which we interact with in our daily lives. And when we're talking about intangible heritage, we're talking about the traditions, rituals, knowledge, and customs that are practiced by peoples and groups. And this is very important for the sake of identity, continuity of society, the dispensation of knowledge, and also economically in the sense of tourism. The graphic on your left shows you that these four areas are not mutually exclusive, whether it's movable or immovable cultural property, tangible or intangible cultural heritage. They are all equally significant and they are all equally facing the same threat due to the climate crisis. Now, UNESCO in 2020 provided us with the heat map, which is the graphic on the left, which shows you the spectrum of risk according to UNESCO and the distribution of risk on the African continent. Now, of course, when we look at North Africa, which has a much higher temperature and which is more severely affected by rising temperature. But if we look at the distribution throughout, we can see that the crisis is basically a continental one. And what is also more alarming is that while we face the greatest threats to climate change in Africa, the majority of research that is being done in the global north, and only 20% of research that is being done on climate crisis and cultural heritage is being done in the global south. Of that 20%, only 1% is being done in Africa. So it's quite significant that we are having this webinar just as our contribution to this crisis. Now, the four main areas that are affecting, or the four symptoms of this crisis, is coastal erosion and sea level rise. There is drought and desertification, flooding and extreme rainfall, and of course, wildfires. This presentation will look at 4 case studies within the African continent that basically highlight the impact of this crisis on our cultural heritage. Now, number one, we have the Suakin Island in Sudan, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, this island, which has existed and is a hub of the Swahili and Arab cultures on Africa, has obviously been dilapidated over the years, but these conservation efforts are further eroded due to the rising sea levels. A lot of the cultural heritage sites within Africa on the coastline are about 30 meters above the dam area level, which means that if there's even a 1 meter rise in the sea levels, it has a severe impact on these heritage resources. The image on your left is just one such structure, which was in good condition over the years, but has rapidly eroded over the last 20 years due to moisture and rising sea levels. The image on your left are the mud brick buildings of the Djenne cultural landscape in Mali. This is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And through drought and desertification, there is further erosion of this cultural heritage site. Another impact that it has in terms of the intangible cultural heritage is that due to the dryness of the soil, the individuals and the populations that are living within this region are unable to further replace or restore these structures, which is an annual practice. Again, we can just see how something as simple as a drought or even having drier temperature conditions than usual can have a very destabilizing effect on the population, especially in Mali, where the site is located. And then this brings us to closer to home. We had the devastating floods in 2022 in KwaZulu-Natal. There was a significant loss of human life. These events of flash floods and extreme weather conditions have been further exacerbated over the years due to changing climate. The main impact, of course, is that these areas that have been constructed and the cultural heritage resources that are located close to them were never built around having this level of moisture. And of course, as you can see on the image on the left, they were never built to sustain this level of humidity or rainfall. So therefore, again, just as you can imagine, within South Africa, which has a massive coastline, and also a lot of shipwrecks and underwater cultural heritage, there is a severe risk to those heritage resources. One of the cases which will be explored today is the Tatham Art Gallery, which is in KZN. And then we have wildfires, which have been a growing occurrence again within South Africa. A lot of us are aware of the fire that devastated the Yaga Reading Room at the University of Cape Town. This is, of course, was caused, as it has been established now, that the very dry conditions, which were not normal, and the rising high temperatures within Cape Town played a significant role to the devastation that happened at the Yaga Reading Room. There was a significant loss of archives within this reading room. And again, we can see a recurrence of this, as well as the fire that affected the Mostert Mill within the Western Cape. And this, of course, brings us to the impact on intangible heritage due to floods, as we saw in Mozambique earlier this year with the cyclone, again, due to the droughts, etc. This has a significant effect, and it disrupts the rituals and festivals that are practiced by indigenous communities. The indigenous knowledge, which is normally used to basically be a mitigation measure against these events, is not as effective as it used to be, because the indigenous knowledge was not developed in the context of rising temperatures and, of course, extreme weather events. The displacement of these populations due to these events has a significant impact on their ancestral connections to their native lands. So what is the way forward in terms of South Africa and Africa in terms of addressing these issues? Number one, we have to question or look at the conventional mode or the conventional understanding of sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, we normally talk about the social, environmental, and economic impact in terms of sustainability. We say that sustainability has to be socially equitable, it needs to be economically viable, and it has to be environmentally bearable. But we in the heritage community have to place cultural sustainability at the center of sustainable development. Our role is to, of course, consider the social sustainability, the economic viability, and the environmental tolerance of development. But we can see that there is a lack in the literature, especially in Africa, looking at cultural sustainability. So what we need to do, as I've said earlier, there is a paucity of research within the African context, which is why we are happy to have you here joining us today within the heritage sector as academic, cultural institutions. We want to encourage you to start focusing on research that looks at cultural sustainability in the face of the climate threat. There has to be continuous monitoring of our cultural resources in order to see the impact of these changing conditions. We have to become more resilient, and that is going to be done through adaptation. Again, we have not been within this context globally or within Africa. Therefore, we have to have adaptive measures in order to mitigate against these climate crises. And of course, there is a lack of policy integration as well as legislative frameworks that speak explicitly to climate change. There has to be, of course, community engagement so that the tangible and intangible heritage that is cherished by these communities can be further protected. And there has to be rigorous documentation of these resources and of these practices, research, etc., on these resources. So our small contribution this Heritage Month is to focus on four case studies. That will be the Tatham Art Gallery in KwaZulu-Natal, which was affected by a flood, the Castle of Good Hope, which we will be looking at how we can basically better the material analysis in order to be more resilient in the face of the climate crisis. We will look at Robben Island and their disaster and risk management framework, which is groundbreaking on the South African, in South Africa and maybe even the African continent, in terms of having a rigorous and resilient framework for disaster management. We will look at the Jagersfontein pit disaster in the Free State. And then we are going to look at how strategic heritage assessments can contribute and assist us in terms of the climate crisis. So this is our, again, very small step towards addressing these issues within the African continent. But we are so grateful to you all for joining us as we embark on this journey of addressing the climate threat on the African continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben, for that insightful overview. And just to introduce Ben, he is a senior manager for heritage conservation management. Ben, just a question from me. What is your first memory of heritage? And how do you think it has changed now due to the effects of climate change?
I think my first memory of heritage takes me back to actually Malawi, where I encountered the mud brick and thatch houses. And as a result of the changing climate, those structures are unable to be restored. The local populations that use, again, the mud brick due to drought and desertification are unable to source the material which basically those structures are constructed of. And this is, again, quite important because there is a tangible structure, which is the mud brick and thatch housing itself. And then there is the impact on the intangible practice of building and restoring these structures every year. And we can think of that, again, I'm using one small example, but this is happening on a continental scale.
That is yeah, because I'm seeing it now, this whole spectrum that you mentioned, the sea level drought, this is happening within South Africa, that is all being experienced. So that spectrum is, wow, I did not think of that. And I do like that you mentioned that this is a dual experience of tangible and intangible. We cannot separate the two. It's a dual experience. So please, if there are any comments or questions, please raise your hands. You can, if you may, as well as put them in the chat, and we'll allow that. Thank you. So noting that there are no comments or questions, that is possibly because you did too well. So, we thank you for that, Ben. So noting that, we will move on to our next presentation, and we are, wow, very much on time, unexperienced for me from past experiences, but this is good. So we will move on to the Tatham Gallery. We have Ms. Tuli Msaleko and Ms. Bethany Meyer that will be presenting, but we will give them 5 minutes just to set up as they are presenting virtually. So at, I'll say 25 to, we'll be back, and thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.